Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So last week we were commemorating the anniversary of the appearance of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who appeared in the eastern part of India 533 years ago. And he is factually the father of the Kirtan movement, which is gradually spreading around the world. And in introducing him, I got a few questions to know a little bit more about what it was that he was actually teaching. So I'll just talk about one of the most extraordinary things that he presented was the opportunity of complete spiritual enlightenment for all, for everyone. And during the time of his appearance, most of these older cultures all over the world were very steeped in class divisions. It was just the way things kind of functioned. And much like in ancient Israel, where you had like a priestly class that sort of dominated society and sort of, determined how everything was going to function and run. India, to a large degree, also had this type of structure where you had a priestly class of people known as the Brahmins, who played their influence on society was pretty profound. Not necessarily from a spiritual point of view, which is what it was meant to be, but more just from kind of setting the tone for how everything was going to function, and claiming, of course, superiority to all others. Many of them were in this state or condition. And so it was widely accepted, for hundreds and hundreds of years, that for a person to attain spiritual emancipation, you had to be a quite extraordinary person. You had to be from this class of people and learn all of the customs and the rituals and follow the systems of purity and everything that was, propagated by them. Or you had to be an extraordinary type of a yogi who often came from the same class of people. And you had to have profound focus and determination to be able to go off and live alone in the forest or in the mountains, and to undertake a really quite difficult and demanding process to be able to attain actual self-realization and God realization. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was actually really radical. While he actually appeared in this class of priestly teachers, and he was profoundly intelligent, he utterly rejected all concepts of bodily identity, that because you were born in a particular family, you were born in a particular social or economic situation, because of your gender, because even of your religious practices, that you were going to be somehow less qualified or unqualified to attain spiritual perfection. And I was just going to relay a couple of stories to sort of demonstrate, what he did. He was from a spiritual perspective, quite a revolutionary. But at the same time, he did follow social customs and norms to quite a large extent, so it wasn't too disturbing for society in general. But early on, one of the people that he took into his association was this really amazing guy who had been born in a Muslim family in the eastern part of Bengal, like Bangladesh these days. And this person, and there's no sort of account of how it happened or where it happened, but he took up this process of the chanting of these spiritual sounds, and he became so immersed in it, and he attained such a elevated spiritual condition that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave him the title of the Nam Acharya. This means that he is the perfect teacher of this form or type of meditation that's practiced with kirtan, or the meditation upon these holy or transcendental sounds. His name, he was called Haridas Thakur. And he was subjected to enormous amounts of persecution, both from the so-called Hindu hierarchy that were really, really upset that somebody coming from what was considered lower than the lowest class Hindu could be keeping company with great saintly people. And so they were really irritated by it, and they were irritated by the fact that he was shown so much respect by the general population. They sought to cause his downfall by entrapping him, paying some very beautiful young woman who was a professional prostitute to seduce him in the dead of night. And after 3 days of attempting, she of course completely failed in the endeavor. Not only that, she ended up falling at his feet and asking for forgiveness for what it was that she was actually, involved in, trying to seek his destruction. But this same group or class of people that sought his downfall this way went and made a complaint to the Muslim rulers of that part of India and said, this guy's a really bad example because he's a Muslim by birth and he's taking up these types of spiritual practices that are embraced by the Hindus, and this is causing huge disrepute to your community. And so under this kind of pressure, he was actually sentenced to death if he did not give up this practice. And he spoke in a very gentle way and said that you can do with my body as you wish, but I cannot give up this practice. So that's a huge story that we won't get into with the details. But there was an attempt to beat him to death, which fundamentally failed, and he later recovered and moved further to the west and came into the company of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who not only embraced him, but gave him the honor and the stature of being a topmost transcendentalist. and spoke of him in such a wonderful way. Even his own followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu were quite stunned when they heard his descriptions. So, this was kind of like par for the course for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He really disrupted a lot of things. And he was addressed by this very endearing term called Patita Pavana. Patita Pavana means the deliverer or the savior of the most fallen of people. In fact, he openly declared that he didn't come for all of the religious kind of people. He actually came to try and give the greatest gift to the most fallen of all people. And one of the things that he did in this regard, in the city where he lived, which was actually comprised of a number of different villages and hamlets all together in this larger area, it was considered the seat of learning, so it was filled with educators and really highfalutin, high society kind of people. And there were two guys that had actually were born into this priestly class, but became complete degenerates, and to the point that they were quite murderous. They formed a little clique of drunken associates. They would rape at will. They would kill at will. They imposed taxes on people in whatever part of the city that they happened to claim as their abode at any time. And people were accosted on the road and demanded to give them money. And so it was like this really horrible situation. These guys were perpetually drunk and just caused chaos and huge amounts of violence everywhere. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had asked his followers to actually go door to door in the city and to beg from people. And he said the way that they would approach people, we have come to beg from you, but we don't seek food, we don't seek money. We beg that you will take up this practice of the chanting of these sacred names, these transcendental sounds, because this is how your life will become perfect. And mostly they were reviled. People thought they were nuts. But a good percentage, at least, of the population were very touched by the sincerity. And they would usually go out, in twos. And Haridas Thakur at that time had come to reside in that area. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had assigned him to go with another extraordinary spiritual personality. His name was Nityananda Prabhu, who was a topmost and extraordinarily spiritually powerful personality. But he had this very childlike demeanor. He was very simple and given to being extremely playful and was very kind to everyone. And when he heard about these two total degenerates, he said, we have to save them. And his sidekick, Haridas Thakur, said, no, this is really madness to try and go near these guys. We just shouldn't do that. So Nityananda insisted that he would attempt. And in his first attempt, they turned on him and on Haridas and chased them down the street, threatening to kill them. And Nityananda Prabhu, he was just laughing hysterically. He thought it was just hilarious. They were kind of a little bit overweight and super intoxicated and couldn't catch up to them. So he was just having fun. But Haridas Thakur didn't think that this was fun at all. He thought it was extremely dangerous. And he said, Haridas, we barely escape with our life. We're not going back there. And Nityananda said, no, we have to save these guys. And so he, in a succeeding day, a few days later, he returned to try and entice them. So he called out to them and asked them to take up this chanting of these transcendental sounds. And one of them, who was became enraged, and he took one of these clay wine vessels they were using and threw it at him, and it hit him in the head and cut him, and there was blood everywhere. And everybody became utterly shocked, because Nityananda Prabhu was seen as a great saintly personality, and the idea that somebody would physically strike him or hurt him was just like completely shocking. And somebody hurriedly went to tell Chaitanya Mahaprabhu what had happened. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu became utterly enraged, and he rushed to the scene. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was really tall. He was like 6'5", 6'6". He had a really, really large and very powerfully built body. And he looked extraordinary. And when he came in the state of rage, threatening to destroy these two complete miscreants, Nityananda Prabhu still had blood streaming down his face, held the legs of Nityananda and begged, of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, begged him, please do not seek, retribution. He said, you have come here to this world to save the most fallen of people, and your reputation as this Patita Pavana will become renowned, and people will take notice if you instead save them. And one of the two brothers, when he heard this plea on his behalf, he was just so overwhelmed. It was something had just struck his heart to the extent that he was just overwhelmed with remorse for the turn of his life and where he found himself and where he was now. And he began weeping and fell on the ground, prostrating himself on the ground and begging the forgiveness of Nityananda Prabhu for what he had done. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu became incredibly pleased with this sudden transformation. And the other brother who had actually done the damage, seeing this, also decided he didn't want to miss out on whatever his brother was receiving in the way of tremendous kindness. And his heart being softened also, he approached and begged forgiveness in this way. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu picked them up and embraced them. And they later described that just the touch of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu sent spiritual thrills through their body. They were just like overwhelmed with feelings of great and ecstatic transcendental joy. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, every evening, he would hold a large kirtan, which not everybody was allowed to attend. These were kind of closed kirtans, where the participants would be deeply absorbed in great transcendental and spiritual ecstasy. And so Chaitanya Mahaprabhu invited these two guys to come with them that evening and to join them. And there was just this monumental transformation. And of course, everybody was utterly shocked at this transformation after so many years of terrorizing everybody. They were overwhelmed to see this change and grew in tremendous respect and regard for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his spiritual potency. We've previously talked about the attainment of spiritual perfection, of what we will call God realization, and also of self-realization. How there can be an experience of a person, by a yogic practice, raising the life air and making it so that the spiritual being leaves the body and merges into this ocean of transcendence, of great spiritual light. And in that experience, there is a full experience of one's spiritual being, but there is a tendency to become oblivious to any concept or experience of individuality. The second type of spiritual realization sought by the yogis was what called Paramatma realization, where one actually, in their meditation, was able to see this manifestation of a divine personality standing within the region of the heart upon a lotus flower. It was utterly divine and looked completely peaceful. And having this vision, the individual becomes overwhelmed with great ecstatic feelings and feelings of tremendous affection. And with this comes a perception of the presence of this feature, Paramatma, within the hearts of all living beings and even within every atom. And so the yogis then developed a really deep sense of kinship with all living beings, seeing them all as my brothers and sisters, and that we were all, and the term is often used, as part and parcel of this divine personality whom Patanjali refers to as Ishvara. But there was a third type of transcendental realization, which is considered the most complete form of spiritual realization, where one encounters now, rather than in a passive way, in an active way, with this divine personality. And there are an infinite ocean of spiritual relationships and varieties of love that can manifest in different persons. Each person has their own unique and individual character and nature and personality and their own natural mood of transcendental love. And this love is said to be so profound that one experiences a complete loss of the self-centeredness. One becomes so utterly absorbed in a mood of great transcendental love and a desire to serve this great Lord of my heart. And this was considered the topmost of spiritual realizations, where the living being actually realizes their essence, their position, and now their natural function. The process for that were applied, the process or paths of yoga that were applied to attain any one of these three types of transcendental experience were considered very difficult, and people needed to be enormously qualified. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he came to deliver a process in the use of the chanting of these transcendental sounds, that if one can actually become increasingly purified and utterly immersed in these sounds, one can awaken this complete realization of the self and of the Supreme Self, the Supreme Lord. But he said that in this particular age, this time that we live, it is called Kali Yuga, where people are considered as far down the ladder as you can go in terms of personal qualification and things, that in this particular age, this process of the use of spiritual sound, of transcendental sound, these holy names or sacred names, if a person actually embraces this fully, even though they may not have any other form of qualification and may have actually lived a life of some misfortune, to be having lived a fallen life, what they categorize as a fallen life, one can easily come to this platform. And this was demonstrated in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's, the influence that he had on these two guys, these two criminal elements, Jaghai and Madhai. And not only them, and countless other people. And so he really demonstrated in his life and teachings that the highest form of spiritual realization, the highest form of spiritual emancipation could be surpassed by properly applying this process. In the ancient Vedic system, it was considered that there were four principal goals in life. It's called dharma, or artha, dharma, karma, kama, and moksha, which means to aspire for economic development, the upliftment of people economically. Then dharma is to live a life of righteousness. Might be called also religiousness, but not in the way people understand that so much now. Then the third was karma, that a person should be able to live a life that is somewhat free of unhappiness and be able to enjoy material experience and facility. But all of this was considered, secondary to what was called moksha, which was spiritual liberation, where one actually became free from the experience of repeated birth and death in the cycle of samsara. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he taught that when you look at these four goals of human life, there is yet a fifth one that is seemed to be unknown to people, but is found in the Vedas. It is called prema. It is the highest condition of spiritual love. And when it begins to awaken within the heart of any person, these other four things become completely insignificant. So not only did Chaitanya Mahaprabhu teach about this principle that had been largely forgotten for quite a few thousand years even though it was part of the ancient Vedas, he demonstrated how it was actually achievable even by one who is greatly unqualified, one who is not very advanced spiritually or inclined towards the spiritual culture, that even the lowest of persons, if they embrace this process, can experience their highest good. And so Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was known not only as the father of Kirtan, but he clearly demonstrated that every person is capable of the highest spiritual realization and experience by following this process. Okay? Any questions?
So, you know how you talked about that there were 4 ways that you could have your connection to God, and it was like inside, and there was some outside, and then you said that through the chanting, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, can you have all of those?
No, there is not a need to. In the path of full spiritual awakening, there is not a need to become what was called Brahman realized, and then Paramatma realized, and then this third condition where one experiences this great ocean of love and Bhagavan realization. It's not that you had to pass through all of them. If a person adopted this process, then it's like these things were simultaneously occurring. But there wasn't a need to become what was considered Brahman realized in the sense of merging into that ocean of light. The actual realization is of my spiritual being, that this body is not me, I'm not temporary, I never die, I can't die. When my body is hurt, when my body is killed, I am not hurt, I am not killed. That is the actual realization. And so when one is embracing, the path that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu laid out, one will simultaneously have these awakenings.
All the 4 things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you said that the highest form was having a relationship with the
Prema.
Supreme. And if you do the chanting, is that important to work out a relationship
Yeah.
that you have?
What happens, and actually a lot of the stuff that we deal with, in these things that we do on mantra night, we don't dig in very deep to a lot of the stuff, and that's okay, that's fine. What happens is that just by perfecting this process of chanting spiritual sound, japa, meditation, or kirtan, or in group, it's called sankirtan. There is a special spiritual potency attached to doing this in group. And when that happens, then automatically, without any extra or separate effort, the process of self-realization happens. And the natural tendency to be in this state of divine spiritual love, it already exists within the very core of your being. And what the chanting does, it uncovers it. And it just spontaneously and gradually begins to manifest.
And then you realize what it is,
Yes.
that relationship you have.
It all becomes clear to you bit by bit. One needs to be patient.
So do you know, have you worked out what relationship you have?
Don't worry about me. I'm not worth discussing.
I'm just wondering how
You don't have to worry, and you don't have to speculate or overthink it. It is actually a transcendental, a powerful spiritual experience, and it happens for most people gradually. It doesn't have to be gradual, but for most it may happen even over a period of their lifetime. But with it comes an increasingly wonderful experience of spiritual experience that just makes it so that people's life is very complete and very wonderful and feels, to be very worthwhile. Okay? So I will chant the mantra Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Hari Om. So I don't know if that's written on those cards that you have. It's not too difficult. You'll pick it up. Bhagavate